Hello, everybody, and welcome back to ZakIsCinema. Today, we're going to be reviewing and discussing the movie Evil Dead 2, which came out in 1987. Now, before we get into this review, if you've ever been confused or perplexed by the opening of Evil Dead 2, you are definitely not alone, because I remember the first time I watched Evil Dead 2 and I was so confused at the movie's opening, wondering if this was a remake or direct continuation. But Sam Raimi actually couldn't use the footage from his original film due to some rights issues, so he actually reshot a more condensed version of the first movie just on a higher budget, which is why Ash suddenly seems to have gone to the cabin only with Linda. And once you know that, the opening makes a lot more sense, and the movie can get right into being the insane sequel it's remembered for. So it's basically better if you look at it like Ash's condensed, faded memory of the first film here. So now that we have that out of the way, we are obviously on the channel covering every single Evil Dead movie leading up to the brand new one coming out in just a couple days, which I am very much looking forward to. Super excited. I adore this franchise. I enjoy all of these movies here, and especially this second one. So let's start reviewing and discussing Evil Dead 2, starting with the positives or just the things that I enjoyed most about this movie. And on my most recent rewatch, what stood out to me the most was the movie's sound design. I feel like the first movie uses its limited budget in the sound department very effectively for what it's going for, but I feel like Raimi and his team here elevate this sequel to a whole other level. Speaking of the sound design, I adore listening, especially in my surround sound setup, all the distorted voices, the peaking audio, but it's never uncomfortable to listen to. It just sounds distorted in this demonic way, and the way that sound itself seems like it's almost possessed by another deadite really creates this overwhelming feeling and chaos of the dead just awakening, coming for you and all our characters here. One of my favorite examples of the sound design here, and what stood out to me comparing the first two movies, is the researchers' tape recordings that are again rediscovered in this second movie. I love as this researcher's voice really becomes more distorted and inhuman, especially at the beginning. It feels like you're listening to someone just being slowly consumed and possessed by the deadites and the evil itself. And of course, you get some more of those iconic flying shots here, that handheld, chaotic energy that Raimi really goes for in a lot of his movies. But you, of course, get those flying shots scattered throughout this movie. And whenever the deadites are shot from that POV all throughout the woods and the setting, it is always joined by that loud, aggressive sound effect here. It genuinely sounds like what I imagine hell would sound like, just 24/7 playing on in the background, and I love how it's utilized here, specifically with that sound design. And again here, similar to what I said with the first movie, Raimi here wastes no time and quickly gets things moving into this sequel. After you move past that brief recap that I honestly just kind of enjoy watching, the movie wastes absolutely no time. Ash is immediately dealing with the possession we saw at the end of the first movie. Linda, his girlfriend, is already gone. The Book of the Dead has already been awakened, and the deadites are instantly back, I would say, within the first 10 to 15 minutes here. I thought the first film jumped into things really quickly, and that was a major positive for me, but this movie is like the first one, but on steroids all the way around. Obviously, with an increased budget and more experience from Raimi, it really shows on screen here. For example, the practical effects are a huge standout. and a huge step up from that first film. Within the first few minutes alone, we get a creepy stop motion claymation sequence of Linda dancing out of her grave, recreating that dance scene we saw in the intro's recap. We see her headless body just running around. At one point, her headless body is running around with a chainsaw, and the incredible effect of just her headless body, but then also the decapitated part of her head. I think at one point, Ash throws it in the grave that he's digging, and she's still talking and screaming at him, and it looks so real to me. The fact that this was all done practically on still such a tiny budget is so impressive because it looks fantastic up until today. And one thing that I really adore about this movie is it is so similar to that first movie, but now we kind of get it more from Ash's perspective, now that he is more of our established main character and our established final guy. For example, I love that we get to see Ash actually get possessed, and we experience that Deadite infestation from Ash's perspective. The first movie kind of showed what happened to people after they became the Deadites, but Evil Dead 2 kind of lets us see from that POV shot the psychological torment and insanity that really happens during the transformation. Like, it's a much slower transformation, at least from Ash's perspective. It almost kind of makes you look at the first film differently and all of Ash's friends, knowing how much of these characters were just internally and externally suffering within. It really makes you look at it a little bit differently. And that slow progression into a Deadite really leads to some of the best movie moments from this film here, at least in my opinion. For example, the mirror scene where Ash sees his reflection and then he kind of jumps out and attacks Ash, only to realize that he is doing it himself and choking himself. It's fantastic. And of course, the iconic and famous possessed hand sequence remains one of the most creative and entertaining physical performances in horror history to me. Bruce Campbell absolutely carries all of these moments here with his physical performance and sells every second of this insanity while still balancing that humorous side while also still being a more serious character. I mean, this is the movie they really figured out what they had with the Ash character, and Bruce Campbell just fully leaning into what this premise really needed and what this premise actually is. And I feel like with Bruce Campbell just stepping it up, this is where Raimi kind of steps it up and shines himself. His understanding on how to blend horror and comedy without either one of those two different genres ever weakening each other is incredible, and I imagine so difficult to balance. For example, watching the character of Ash slowly lose his mind in that scene right after the mirror scene where the deer head, the lamps and furniture start moving in this claymation kind of way, just giggling and laughing at him while Ash is like losing his mind and dancing alongside with them. It should be ridiculous, and the perfect thing is it is ridiculous, but it's also genuinely kind of unsettling when you realize what's actually happening to the character of Ash and what that must feel like from his perspective. The movie constantly just manages to be creepy, unsettling, but also over the top and hilarious at the same time. And even though this movie does follow similar beats from the first film, I love how the movie kind of subverts expectations here, especially during the wood sequence with that iconic violation scene from the first film. If you've seen the first film, you immediately think the movie's just going to kind of repeat that, but instead it does something a little bit different and completely violates this character in a different way, where it's just dragging her through the woods like she's latched onto some four-wheeler, just being dragged through as all these tree branches are just constantly stabbing her in her face as she's screaming, going at this impossible speed. It's a great example of Raimi taking some of these familiar ideas while finding a new and creative direction to kind of take them in. And honestly, I think this is my favorite portrayal of the Ash character within this franchise. This is where they finally figure out who the character is and use him to that potential. He is vulnerable, terrified, but he's also becoming a larger than life horror icon. And Bruce Campbell is just so perfect in this role. It is genuinely almost impossible to think of anyone ever taking his place. And in here, you of course get those iconic, amazing, Evil Dead, absurd blood splatter effects all throughout this movie. The scene where the mechanic character gets dragged into the cellar as his girlfriend is desperately trying to pull him up, and then all of a sudden, just gallons and gallons of blood start spraying out like this pipe just bursts out of the hatch is both horrifying but over the top enough that it is actually kind of funny. And it is one of the best examples about how the Evil Dead 2 takes extreme horror and really just pushes it into that fun spectacle kind of nature. And of course, you can't talk about this movie without mentioning the iconic suit up sequence and the groovy sequence. Ash building the chainsaw hand right after he chopped off his own hand, sawing off the shotgun with it, and getting that slow camera reveal is one of the greatest hero transformations I feel like I've ever seen displayed on a film. And it is truly the moment that Ash becomes Ash. And even though this entire movie is insane, the movie still finds a way to get a little bit crazier in the third act, which I feel like all these Evil Dead movies really shine in their third act. The Deadites become way more powerful than they've ever been. The trees come alive, start barging into the cabin. Faces just melted and dysmorphed within the tree bark, and the entire cabin feels like it is literally and figuratively collapsing under supernatural chaos, and you get like a portal mixed with a tornado. I mean, it is actually insane. And every time you think the movie's kind of reached its limit, you get to the third act of an Evil Dead movie and it just pushes past it in the best way possible. And I also think the ending here is a significant improvement over the first film to me. Instead of ending on one of those cliche, typical one last cheap scare shots, Evil Dead 2 concludes the cabin storyline while also simultaneously launching Ash into literally an entire new adventure. Seeing him sucked through this portal and transported back to medieval times is such a wild direction to take in this story, but it works perfectly because it not only sets up the third one, Army of Darkness, but it makes this whole trilogy feel just so ambitious, so unique, and way more unique and crazy than I imagine most people were expecting after they watched the first film. And it's even set up earlier in Evil Dead 2 as they're going through the Necronomicon, seeing some of the history and lore from the researchers' perspective, and noticing that back in the day in like the 13th century or something, there was this hero that came to save the people from the Deadites. And in the picture, it looks similar to Ash, but you don't really think about it the first time you watch the movie. But then as he's sucked back and the movie ends with that, you're like, oh shit, Ash is literally going full circle here. So it's just like a mind-bending sci-fi concept trapped in this goofy, over-the-top horror comedy that just works so well. It's Raimi just spilling his creative thoughts and feelings on the pages, and all of them landed so perfectly here. I adore this movie. One of the most easily to rewatch horror franchises, but specifically with the Evil Dead 2, it is just such a perfect movie to throw on if you're sad, bored, if you want to watch a movie, if you're happy, have it on in the background, sit down and watch it, take breaks and just come back to it whenever you want to. It hits all those areas for me and I absolutely love it. But with that said, I do have a couple nitpicks here, so let's jump over to my mixed aspects for this movie. And maybe I missed something, maybe it explains it in the TV show I never saw, or maybe some of the comics, but one thing I've always been curious or stood out to me is that Ash never fully transforms in this movie into a Deadite the way that everybody else has done and will continue doing, at least from what I've seen in this franchise. And I really do like the idea of the possession slowly spreading, only affecting parts of him itself, like with the little hand plot line, and we get to see him go from human to Deadite back to human again. But he's really the only character in the franchise that gets treated this way, and the movie never really touches on exactly why. It's not a huge issue because obviously Ash is the best character this franchise has given us, but it always stood out to me because any other character, they get attacked or you get the POV shot and they're instantly a Deadite. The only time they turn back into human is when the Deadite is trying to play a trick on their next victim, and that never really happens to Ash. So maybe I missed something, but that just kind of stood out to me as like a continuity error. And to me, it's not like these Evil Dead movies, besides Ash, have a great supporting cast, but I do think the supporting cast in here is honestly pretty forgettable, even compared to the first movie, which I'm not even huge on Ash and all his friends in that movie. But in this one, the researcher's daughter and mechanic character serve the purpose that they're serving and help make the sequel feel bigger and different, but they never come across as particularly memorable here. They're not bad characters. I just don't think they have much of a lasting impact once Ash kind of finds his own groove here and completely steals the show. I just always kind of hated the researcher's daughter character. I think it's necessary for the story. I just kind of wish they had someone better to bounce off Bruce Campbell, in my opinion. But with all that said, I would say that overall, Evil Dead 2 is a wildly inventive horror comedy masterpiece that perfects Sam Raimi's blend of terror, practical effects, and absurd humor while transforming Ash into one of the most iconic horror heroes of all time. So for my rating for this movie, another easy one for the Evil Dead franchise. I actually own this one on 4K. I think I paid full price. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but I adore the 4K release for this. It looks fantastic. I meant to mention that too. The blood splatter effects on my OLED TV on 4K. Absolutely adore this movie. So I'm gonna keep this. If we ever get to 8K, I'll upgrade it to 8K here. This will always be a part of my collection. So you guys have my thoughts on Evil Dead 2, please down below. I'm sure everybody's seen this movie. Let me know your thoughts and feelings on Evil Dead 2, and also give me that point of reference. Do you prefer the second one? Do you prefer the first one? I'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings as to why. But that's about it. I appreciate anybody watching my videos, so thank you so much. And yeah, look forward to more ZakIsCinema coming very soon.